I made this rack to store my Ryobi cordless tools, and today I'm going to share some of the thought process behind the design and show you how I built it. Hey, it's Pete. Welcome back to the workshop. I've mentioned before that my shop space is very limited. I've been tripping over this Ryobi bag of cordless tools for years. There are really only two places I can keep it, either on the floor beside my milling machine where it's easily accessible but always in the way, or back in a corner where it's out of the way but I can't really get to it easily when I need it. It was time to fix this problem. I started taking measurements and sketching out some design ideas. I had two design goals. I wanted a storage solution that would be easy to modify in the future when these tools wear out and are replaced. I know these tools won't last forever. Most of them are the older blue style Ryobi, so they have some age on them. I also wanted to be able to store the accessories that went with the tools. More about that later. I came up with a design that would fit within the 23 inches of wall space that I had available. I started with 3/4 inch plywood for the outer case and decided to create dados down the entire length of the sheet first. This would ensure that all the dados were in the same spots and lined up properly. I used pre-cut 2x4 sheets of plywood for ease of handling and transporting for this entire project. The outer shell requires 3 1/2 inch wide dados, 1/4 inch deep to receive the shelves. The first dado for the bottom shelf was with the fence 1 inch from the stack of blades. For the middle shelf, the fence was moved back to 7.5 inches. And finally, the fence was set to 17.5 inches from the dado to cut the slot for the top shelf. A 21 inch wide piece was then cut from this sheet for the back of the rack. And two 12 inch wide pieces for the side panels, leaving just a small amount of scrap from this first sheet. Since this was a pre-cut sheet, it's not exactly 24 inches wide, but that's not a critical dimension in this project. It will just affect the overall finished height. Since the rear and the sides were all being cut from the same sheet, they'll all end up at the same height, and that's really all that matters. There are 3 shelves in the rack, plus a series of fingers at the bottom for holding the tools. These are all cut from the 1/2 inch plywood. I cut off a 12 inch piece that will be set aside for making the fingers later. Then I cut an 11.5 inch piece for the bottom shelf. The middle and top shelves are not cut until after creating the dados. The bottom shelf and the still combined middle and top shelf were cut to their finished width at 21.5 inches. There is 3.25 inches between every dado except for the first and last, where I split the difference to make everything work out. This made the first and last opening slightly wider. I started with the fence at 3 5/8 of an inch and did the outer dado on each end. Then I backed up to 7 1/8 and did the next 2 dados. The final dado was at 10 5/8 of an inch. After the dados were cut, I split it into 2 11.5 inch shelf pieces, again with very little waste. I next started on the finger panels. I made these to be removable so that they can be changed as my collection of tools change in the future. I can already smell the brushes burning in one of my drills, so I know its days are numbered. I want to be able to accommodate future tools that may require being hung in different orientations. The fingers themselves are based around 3.5 inch wide panels, with the outer 2 panels being 3/4 inch wider to account for the width of the sides of the cabinet. There is room for 6 panels, but I opted to make only 5, with one of them being double wide to hold my circular saw. The final bit of cutting on the table saw was to rip down the 1/4 inch plywood to make these bin dividers. These are 10 inches tall and 11 1/4 inches deep, and I made a total of 5 of them. Just a quick note here, the cutting you see me doing is out of order from how it actually happened. I wanted to make this easy to understand, so I've divided this video up based on the parts I'm making. In reality, I grouped all the initial cuts together, and then all the dados, and then the final cuts, so I wasn't continually swapping the saw back and forth from cutting to dadoing. Assembling this storage rack was really straightforward. I applied glue to all the dados, and then added a few staples to hold everything in place while the glue set up. This storage rack requires 3 pieces of plywood, one each of 1/4, 1/2, and 3/4 inch. I will have links down in the video description to some of the tools used on this project, as well as where you can download the measured drawing. To create the fingers, I started by marking a spot in the center of each panel. I used a 2-inch hole saw to create the initial opening. When using a hole saw, I like to drill from both sides to prevent the cut from splintering when the saw breaks through. This has the added advantage that it makes removing the plug from the saw easier as well. I also like to use the clutch setting on my drill. It really saves my wrists when the blade jams in the cut. I then marked lines tangent to the circle and cut these out with the jigsaw. The leading edge of the fingers are supported by screws and spacers. This requires a hole to be drilled between the fingers. I clamped the panels in the vise and drilled holes centered on the cut line 1 inch in from the edge. The bottom shelf was next drilled for holes to accept T-nuts, which will be used to attach the finger panels. The rear of the fingers were pre-drilled for screws that will be used to attach them to the lower edge of the rack. The fingers require a spacer at the front. I 3D printed mine, but they could be made out of almost anything. With all of the prep work done, it was time to do the final assembly. The fingers are attached with number 8 screws, washers, and spacers. This arrangement effectively positions and supports the fingers, but allows them to be easily removed for future modifications. I used pocket hole screws at the rear, but this could be almost anything you have on hand. I did end up going back and trimming my screws a bit. 1 3/4 inch screws weren't long enough, and 2-inch were just a bit too long. If I had the forethought to countersink the T-nuts, the 1 3/4 inch screws probably would have been perfect. The final step here is to create some storage for all the accessories, the bits and blades and tools that go along with these tools. I need to put some additional thought into this. I don't just want a shelf where everything is going to collect. I made the opening 6 inches tall so that it can accommodate the blades from the circular saw. I want purpose-built storage that will remain modular so that it can be swapped out as the tool selection changes. I'm going to be creating this storage with a combination of wood and 3D printed parts. I even located some filament that's a close match for the Ryobi green. Hey, if you want to check out some of my other shop storage ideas, I got a whole playlist of them. Click that link to the left and I'll see you over there.